Performance crossovers really are the best of both worlds. You get luxury, comfort, practicality, and interior space to go along with the great driving dynamics that, for enthusiasts, makes owning a crossover totally acceptable in their social circles. But also, it's a vehicle that is one of the best values that you can find out there on the market, even today with the car shortage and chip shortages, and also the prices that we're seeing right now for used and new vehicles. And in fact, if you go to your local dealer, you are most likely going to find a BMW X3 M40i, Porsche Macan S, or Audi SQ5. And really, when you look at the price point, it's not that bad considering what you're paying for an S4, MT40i, and C43. And we have featured the Q5 3 times already in the last 2 years, and this is my first time taking a look at the SQ5. Now, I know a number of people who do own them, they love them, but I've always felt that the BMW X3 M40i is the benchmark, and it's still one of the best vehicles you can buy from the BMW brand. But maybe I'm totally wrong on that, and we're gonna find out at the end of this video. This particular market really is overly saturated. You have plenty of options on the table from a wide range of brands, and that list continues to grow each and every year, like in 2021 with the Genesis GV70, and also later last decade with the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. But when it comes to performance, Americans always seem to be drawn in by the SQ5, despite the fact that there might be better alternatives out there, like the BMW X3 M40i, or maybe the Mercedes Benz GLC 43, and of course the Porsche Macan S. But that's why I am here. I want to fully understand why this crossover is so appealing to buyers, why it's so highly coveted, and why it might be the best all-around crossover in this segment. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Audi of Natick in Natick, Massachusetts, for allowing me to do this review. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Audi inventory and specifically their SQ5 inventory. They have plenty of them on the lot right now, and if you are looking at buying a new vehicle today, they should definitely be the destination that you go to when it comes to buying a new Audi. Also, before we get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. And so, without wasting any further time, let's get right in this review. There was once a time where the idea of owning a performance crossover was deemed unnecessary, despite the growing interest thanks to the Porsche Cayenne and BMW X5. But few brands ventured into the compact market to offer an alternative to sports sedans. Then Audi comes along in 2012 and gives us the SQ5, which essentially was and still is a lifted S4. And while there may have been some hesitancy at first, it was embraced rather quickly to become a staple in this segment. And ever since, rivals have attempted to emulate Audi's success to guide enthusiasts towards owning a crossover for their next vehicle. But as times have changed and new competitors enter the segment, the SQ5 has remained the same to the delight of many. And while conventional wisdom would suggest otherwise, this is still Audi's market to lose. Starting off with pricing, our model today is a Premium Plus, which comes in at just under $60,000. When looking at where the SQ5's price range begins, it does undercut some rivals, including the Porsche Macan S, which many are eager to add into the conversation, regardless of the fact that for 2022, its $65,000 price tag makes it more expensive than all the German competitors. You often hear the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Audi has taken that to heart over the years, making only minor adjustments to perfect a crossover that arguably has a wider consumer demographic compared to others in this segment, where they draw in both enthusiasts and everyday car shoppers. With the SQ5 still being an SUV, ground clearance comes in at 8.2 inches, and it's for that reason you can drive this vehicle around throughout the winter. However, at the expense of cornering ability and feeling planted on the road. Throughout its almost 10 years of existence, the SQ5 up to this point has blended in on the roadways, where it doesn't draw too much attention to itself, often fitting the drivers who own this crossover that desire to be less conspicuous when cutting loose and having some fun on empty back roads. The facelift for 2021 kind of changed that, where Audi integrated a honeycomb grille, and the front fascia as a whole became more streamlined and sporty. Of course, our model is equipped with the black optic package, further adding to the low-profile look, and compared to prior years, the SQ5 has a distinguishable appearance. For a classier and cutting-edge quality to the headlights, the Prestige is going to offer the Matrix design LED lights for a more upscale vibe. But remember, you will be paying a little extra for that feature. Moving over to the side profile, this SQ5 is sitting on 20-inch wheels, which we recommend over the 21s that will negatively affect ride quality, as some have pointed out that the suspension is less forgiving compared to the Q5. Throughout the test drive, never once did I feel uncomfortable, and in fact, I would have liked a stiffer and rigid suspension that inspires confidence when you're on a spirited cruise. Since this SQ5 is painted in Mythos Black, the gloss black side mirrors aren't going to stand out, but you will have LED turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety. Then coming around to the back, in the past, critics would point to the fake exhaust that just didn't seem to fit the sporty nature of this crossover. But thanks to that minor refresh, quad exhaust tips add some aggression to the SQ5. Not too common here in the US, Audi integrated sequential taillights, or as they call them, dynamic turn signals, for a far more upscale look, specifically at night. Overall, for the rear fascia, there's really only been minor cosmetic enhancements, and objectively, besides a few giveaways for both up front and the rear, if you were to park a Q5 next to an SQ5, you'd have to look a little closer to see what the differences are between the two. Under the hood, the Audi SQ5 is powered by a 3-liter turbocharged V6 engine that puts out 349 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque, and is paired with an 8-speed automatic transmission. Earlier this year, we had featured the Q5, and the differences between both models are immediately evident when it comes to performance, and it's not just due to the SQ5's sub 5-second 0 to 60 acceleration time, it's also the handling and willingness to respond on demand to give drivers more engagement behind the wheel. Compared to rivals, the SQ5 can hold its own against sportier crossovers. But as we'll find out during the test drive, its on-road demeanor, specifically on back roads, may make you think twice before taking corners at higher speeds like we see from the BMW X3 M40i and Porsche Macan. You can opt for dynamic steering, which may enhance your driving experience and better suit your driving style. For fuel economy, you're looking at right around 18 miles per gallon in the city and 24 miles per gallon on the highway. So since I've already gone over the Audi Q5 numerous times on this channel, I don't want to be redundant when it comes to the interior layout. So if you haven't watched my Audi Q5 video, I'll leave the link in the description below so you can check out a more full in-depth look at what this vehicle is going to offer. But I really want to dive into the technology aspect, because that is going to be huge if you are looking at other vehicles in this market, such as what BMW is offering and also Mercedes Benz. And what I'm going to say here is that Audi has a very cleanly designed layout, where you have Audi's virtual cockpit. You also have a 10.1-inch touchscreen with Audi's latest MMI user interface, which in my opinion is still the easiest to use and quickest to respond in this market. I just wish though that we did get the rotary dial for the 2021 and 2022 models. I still feel that's a missing piece to this vehicle, where it made it very easy to scroll through different menus and access different settings, and I really want to see that make its way again at some point. I just think that when you look at other vehicles in this market, like the Genesis GV70, BMW X3, and even with the Mercedes Benz, you get the touchpad. I think it needs to make its way back onto the SQ5 to really be, in my opinion, more driver-friendly, but also I think on par with its closest rivals. What I also like too for this particular model, you do have carbon fiber inlay, which really makes this vehicle look classy, but also sporty and enthusiast-driven as well. The sunlight that bounces off this carbon fiber just makes it look so good, and really I think it adds to the quality aspect of this vehicle. Then, of course, as we saw with the Q5, you do have 2 rows of buttons for your climate control settings, your 3-level heated seats, and then for the second row, you have your drive mode selector, your auto start stop, traction control on and off button, park assist features, hill descent control, and you can turn off this user interface. So if you don't want to be focused on that, you can turn that off, and that way you can just focus on the driving experience and what's ahead of you. Then as you make your way to the center console, you will have a USB input, 12-volt outlet, your start-stop button, and a couple cubbies for very small items that are smaller than a smartphone or a wallet. Then on our particular model, we do have a wireless phone charging pad and also wireless Apple CarPlay, which is great to see. As you guys know, with the chip shortage and part shortage, some Q5s for 2022 are not coming with that wireless phone charging pad, so certainly keep that in mind if you are shopping for a new vehicle right now. Also, you will have a center storage compartment, which is very spacious. You can easily fit small items in here, such as a wallet or a smartphone, and there will be a USB-C input. And finally, rounding out the front seating area, you do get a massive panoramic moonroof, which lets in a lot of natural light to the interior, and also it makes this cabin seem a lot bigger than in reality. Now for passengers in the back, we're going to start off on the passenger side, and this seat is adjusted further back. It's also on a recline, and I have a good amount of legroom to work with here. Now, of course, I'm not the tallest person out there. I'm around 5'5", so obviously most seating situations I'll be comfortable. But I do think that if you're on the height of 5'8" or 5'9", this should be more than accommodating. And that's one of the reasons why the SQ5 and the Q5 actually stand out in this segment regardless of what the engine size is under the hood. And that's because you have a lot more legroom than most vehicles in this market, such as the BMW X3, Mercedes Benz GLC 43, and Genesis GV70. In fact, the SQ5 and Q5 is outclassed by the Volvo XC60. And obviously the Volvo XC60 is a completely different vehicle, full-on luxury, and really not very sporty at all. So most likely families are going to gravitate towards that vehicle. But if you are a family-oriented person and you do have kids in the second row all the time, the SQ5 is perfect for that because you're going to have a good amount of legroom. And more importantly, when it comes to headroom, you would think looking at the Q5 and SQ5 from the outside that maybe the roofline is a bit lower than some other vehicles in this market. But actually, you have a good amount of headroom to work with here. I don't think taller passengers are going to hit their head on the headliner. And obviously, this would be the option to go with rather than the Sportback. Because the Sportback, you are going to be sacrificing a bit, not only when it comes to headroom, but also that practicality, which we're going to find out and check out in a few minutes. Then moving over to the center seat, the center hump is very aggressive, so certainly keep that in mind. That's going to play a major role in how much room you have back here and how many people you can fit in the second row. Because as I say with most compact crossovers, they're just not that accommodating. They're not that spacious. So you can have 2 people sitting on the outboard seats pretty comfortably, but trying to squeeze that third person in is going to be quite the daunting challenge, in my opinion, just because this is a compact crossover, shoulder room is not very abundant, and that if you are looking for a family vehicle, I would recommend taking a look at the Q7. Then moving over to the driver's side, this seat is adjusted to someone of my height, around 5'5", and obviously I have plenty of legroom to work with here, but I do think that taller passengers and also taller drivers are going to still feel comfortable in this vehicle, where if you do have average-sized adults in the second row on a day-to-day basis, they will be comfortable. They're going to be able to sit back here and not feel claustrophobic. And that's really important for this vehicle, and I think that's why ultimately most people still gravitate towards the SQ5 over the S4. And that, I think, is really something that's not looked into too much, where you like the S4, you like its sporty characteristics, you like its sporty tendencies, but it's not practical necessarily, and it's not the most accommodating for passengers in the second row, whereas the SQ5 does all that, and I think it's a better value at the end of the day. Also back here, you will have 2 rear air vents to go along with climate control. Now we do have empty buttons, which would be for our 3-level heated outboard seats. We have 2 USB inputs, a 12-volt outlet, and rounding out the rear seating area, you do get a center armrest with 2 cup holders. Now coming around to the back, you're going to receive a power liftgate. And inside, behind the second row seats, you're looking at right around 25.5 cubic feet of room to work with, which is not class leading by any means, although it will outclass the GLC 43. But this is exactly why you want to go with the SQ5 over the S4, as we talked about with the second row seating area, as you're going to have a lot more practicality to work with, especially if you're somebody who is constantly on the go, going on road trips, or if you're like myself and you have camera gear with you or anything of value that you're carrying all the time, then you're going to want to have the SQ5. Now, I think you'll be able to fit around 4 to 5 bags of luggage, if not more, which is certainly perfect for somebody that does have a family and you do go to the mountains this time of year to ski and snowboard, or maybe you're the adventurous type and you're maybe hiking during the summertime. Then on either side of the rear cargo area, you will have some netting for some smaller items such as water bottles, car detail equipment, and also a first aid kit. Also on both sides of this cargo area, you'll have quick release tabs that will conveniently lower the second row seats, giving you around 52 to 54 cubic feet of room, so it doubles this space in size. So now if you have longer items such as those skis or snowboards, you can fit them back here with ease. And then once you're done, just press the button and the liftgate will close automatically. So we are now behind the wheel of the Audi SQ5. Let's take this out for an extensive test drive to see how it performs and how it compares to the BMW X3 M40i, which I still feel is the benchmark in this segment. Even though there's a lot of new arrivals such as the Genesis GV70, I still feel the BMW X3 is the best vehicle when you're looking at buying a performance crossover at around $60,000. But maybe the SQ5 is going to surprise me today. Now, with this being a sporty crossover, I do want to get the highway portion of this test drive done first, just to really see how it does differ from its closest rivals. Unfortunately, I won't be doing a 0 to 60 time acceleration here because there is a cop right there, so would not be the smartest decision for me to do. So sadly, no 0 to 60 acceleration for you guys, but that's not necessarily what I think this crossover is all about. Sure, you have a 0 to 60 time of around 4.7 seconds, and it is going to be a little slower than the BMW X3 M40i, but merely 0.3 of a second, so do you really want to go overboard with that? But practicality isn't supposed to be this fun, and having a crossover that is actually enjoyable to drive on a daily basis really is supposed to be unheard of. And we hear that in the enthusiast community all the time, that, oh, you gotta go with the sedan, or if you really do need to be practical, you go with the station wagon. But that's one of the issues with this particular subsegment in the compact crossover market. And when you look at it from a journalistic perspective, you don't really know what is the right balance and what is the right approach to reviewing these vehicles, because on one hand, when it comes to the enthusiast, they're going to look at these vehicles and say, okay, they're fun to drive, bigger engines than the Q5, GLC 300, and BMW X3. But you're always going to have the enthusiasts that are going to say, specifically for BMW and Mercedes Benz, they're not real M or AMG vehicles. And all of a sudden, they're just looked at as being second rate, which I think is a complete overreaction. And that's just my take, having driven these vehicles over the last few years, is that this particular price range at around $60,000, you get quite a lot. You get the performance of a BMW M340i or Audi S4, but you get the practicality that comes with it. But then you have to look at it from the other side of the equation, and that is the regular consumer market. Because they may look at an SQ5 and say, that might be a little too much for me. I just want a Q5, I just want that practicality. And now all of a sudden, you have this small little market that isn't really drawing in a lot of buyers. And you see that on the used market even today with the car shortages. I look at the Macan S, the BMW X3 M40i, and the Audi SQ5, and those are vehicles that are actually sitting on the lot. And if you are looking at buying a vehicle right now, even with the prices being as high as they are, I would recommend taking a look at this segment, because I do think you're going to find some great deals on the used market, and maybe even in the new market where they can't really unload these vehicles, where they're not getting those sales as fast as other vehicles. And we're seeing that for the S4, which you really can't find right now, and even vehicles like the Mercedes Benz C43, those are rare. But for crossovers, they are abundant, relatively speaking, and I do think they're providing a lot of value. Now, you're always going to have people that are going to say that, oh, I wish Audi would go with an RSQ5, but that's never really been Audi's MO. They've always had a vehicle that is perfect for enthusiasts on a budget, and it tends to undercut the closest rivals. So even for the SQ5, it's undercutting the GLC 43 by around $4,000. So right then and there, you're already receiving a lot of value for its price point. But also, I love with the 6-cylinder, I think the 8-speed automatic pairs a lot better with this engine over the 4-cylinder. But there is one thing that is standing out to me compared to the BMW X3 M40i, and that is the lack of a dynamic feel. So of course, in a straight line, you have that performance. You can get off the line pretty quickly. You do have a decent amount of low-end torque, relatively speaking. But when it comes to the handling aspect, and we're going to get into this when we get on this winding back road coming up soon, is that it just doesn't have the stiff suspension and the tighter steering that we experience with the BMW X3 M40i. Now on this back road, even in dynamic mode, the steering is not tight. It's a bit loose, but it is direct. And again, that may really draw in buyers who are not looking for that aggressive feel. They're not looking to be completely abused on back roads, especially up here in New England. Now, I've heard from other people that when it comes to the suspension for the SQ5, it's not as forgiving, but I don't really agree with that. I think it's still soft where you're not going to be thrown around on horrible paved roads. So you can definitely feel the body roll for sure, even at lower speeds. And compared to the S4 felt a lot more planted on this road. So I'm not as confident taking this road at higher speeds. And I think that's really where journalists have really been negative and critical on this crossover, just because it's not the most sporty in its segment. What I would say though is that a good comparison would be the Genesis GV70. And the Genesis GV70 does have a sport mode. It's aggressive, twin turbocharged V6, but you feel that body roll. And ultimately, what I feel with the Audi SQ5 is that it's going to draw you in with a nicer interior. I think when it comes to technology, it's a better environment to be in compared to the BMW X3 M40i. Also, I think it's a cleaner design compared to the Mercedes Benz GLC 43. Where the GLC 43, and this is subjective of course, but Mercedes Benz has a lot going for it when it comes to their interiors. There's a lot to digest, and you tend to sit there for a few minutes understanding how everything works, specifically with their infotainment system and dashboard layout, because with the infotainment systems for their newer vehicles, there's 3 different ways you can use that infotainment system and user interface, with the touchscreen, with the buttons on the steering wheel, or the touchpad, and it can be a bit confusing, whereas the Audi SQ5 is pretty straightforward with its interior design, and it's clean, and that's what I like as a driver. I'm not focused on anything else, I'm just focused on what's in front of me, and the fact that the technology is very clear and upscale, but also very simplistic to use. Now, when it comes to front vision, you have plenty of it. Nice panoramic view. A-pillars are not really that aggressive at all, so that won't create any blind spots as you are cornering or if you are in the city. One thing I know is that some vehicles do have very aggressive A-pillars, and that is somewhat dangerous, because I've noticed sometimes where there might be a pedestrian and I don't see them for a split second. So that's one thing I do like about this vehicle. Now, when it comes to side mirrors, they are placed in a good spot. They're nice and big. What I also like too with these side mirrors is that the blind spot detection is on the mirror casing itself rather than the mirror, and that's one thing that I don't really like about some vehicles, where you have that small little icon that glows orange, whereas this, you actually see it, and you'll see that in your peripheral vision. So again, safety wise, that's great to see. And then looking out behind you, even with the headrests, it's not really creating much of a lack of vision there, so I can't see everything around me. So I've put the SQ5 in comfort mode, and it doesn't feel as on edge, which is to be expected, and it feels more dailyable. So if you are on back roads like this, you're just in the suburbs, and you're not really looking to really have an engaging and aggressive driving experience, this is one you'd probably going to enjoy the most, just because if you do have family members with you, your kids, you're going to enjoy this. But when you're by yourself, though, and you want to have some fun, it comes to life. And that's one of the reasons why I do like performance crossovers and sporty crossovers, because they're perfect daily drivers. They can do both. They can be your comfortable commuter, they can be the vehicle that's suitable for you and your family, but then when you're by yourself and you're on roads where there's no traffic, put it in dynamic mode and you can have a lot of fun. So ultimately, where does the Audi SQ5 slot into place in this segment? And we're going to start off with performance, because that's what's most important for this vehicle. If you are looking for something a little bit more engaging and enticing, you're not going to go with the Q5. The SQ5 is going to be on your radar. And in straight line performance, you're not going to notice much of a difference compared to its closest rivals. I mean, of course, with the X3 M40i, it's 0.3 of a second faster. If you really want to go overboard with that, clearly this particular market isn't for you. You're going to want to go with the X3M, the GLC 63, or a Porsche Macan GTS. Now, a lot of people keep bringing up the Porsche Macan in this market, and I'm getting tired of that, because you want to go with the S at the very least for Porsche, and you're spending $65,000, which is exactly where the SQ5's price range ends with the Prestige. So I can't take that as a serious competitor. Obviously, with Porsche, there's a different agenda there. I think if you're buying a Porsche, you're doing that for a whole different reason. It's probably the badge more so than the performance. Also, I think the interior layout is a bit more cockpit-like when it comes to that fighter jet-like feel. Now, when it comes to handling, steering input, and body roll, that's where I feel the SQ5 isn't as aggressive, isn't as dynamic, and that's why I still feel the BMW X3 M40i is the benchmark in that regard. I think when it comes to straight-on performance, BMW has it locked in, where they're going to give you the ultimate driving machine experience. They're going to have that more track-like feel, where you're going to have that confidence on back roads and up in the mountain roads. You're going to really enjoy that vehicle. However, where Audi excels is with their interiors. I've always felt that Audi's technology is ahead of BMW's, and it's easier to use than Mercedes Benz's technology. So that's where I feel that Audi has a niche, and why they've always been successful is that they're not going to give you the most sports car experience, but they're also not going to give you a vehicle that's too soft either. And that's always been Audi's MO. They've always been that brand where they're luxurious, they're focused on buyers who tend to lean more towards the professional side. They want a vehicle that does impress, that has great exterior designs, but not one that's so flashy where they stand out. And Audi understands their customers more than anyone else in this market, at least in my opinion. And that's why I feel the Audi SQ5 is the jack of all trades in this market compared to rivals. Although what I would say is that the Genesis GV70 is at least on that list. They're at least second underneath the SQ5, because having reviewed that vehicle this year and comparing them, if I could compare them back to back, that would be a very close competition. I think the Genesis GV70 could give a lot of vehicles in this segment a run for its money. But I think ultimately, when you look at what the SQ5 is offering from the technology aspect, the interior layout, I still think you're going to lean towards Audi, regardless of whether you're looking at the GLC or the X3. See, that right there is why you want to go with an SQ5. The Q5 is not going to give you that in any way, shape, or form. But then as we get up on this corner here, that's where the SQ5 tends to stand out in this market, not necessarily in a great way, because it's not as dynamic, but you don't have that confidence when you are taking corners like that. So certainly keep all of that in mind. But as I've said throughout this test drive, that I think Audi understands their customers a lot more, where they know their buyers want to have that performance, but they don't want to have the aggressive steering. They don't want to have that stiff suspension. And honestly, if buyers in this segment really wanted that, they would demand an RSQ5. So I think the RSQ5 would give you the better handling and also the stiffer suspension, but I don't think we're ever going to see that with Porsche having the GTS for the Macan. So all in all, I really do like this crossover. It's really a great balance where it is comfortable. It's a bit more comfortable than its closest rivals, I must say. I also like the fact that the interior layout is more simplistic, that it's not as complex as what we see with the Mercedes Benz GLC 43. And also, I love the fact that it's a stark difference from the Q5, that it doesn't feel like a sportier Q5. It feels like a completely different animal and beast, where you have a straight line performance, you have the crackles of the exhaust, you have that 6-cylinder engine, but also the 8-speed automatic transmission pairs up very well with this powertrain. And that's why I do feel that if you are somebody who feels as though that the Q5 isn't enough, that the handling, the steering just isn't on point, and it's not as dynamic as you're looking for, then the SQ5 is worth the upgrade without question. Because even though this steering isn't tight by any means, it's not as light and loose as an Alfa Romeo Stelvio either, it actually is a nice balance. It's not hot, not cold, but it's the right temperature. And that's why I think the SQ5 has done so well for itself over the last almost 10 years. I cannot believe the SQ5 has been around since around 2014. So it's done quite well, and that's why I think buyers in this particular market have always gravitated towards the SQ5, because it does everything you want it to without being too sporty, but also not being too luxurious either. So in closing, after spending a good amount of time with the Audi SQ5, what are my final thoughts on this sporty crossover? And what I'm going to say here is something that I think a lot of my colleagues and other automotive journalists would agree on. And that is, when you step inside and you go for a drive, you expect an Audi S4-like driving experience, because with the S4, you get a car that I think is better than its closest rivals, such as the BMW M40i and also the Mercedes Benz C43 AMG. I just think it is the perfect car in its market. And you kind of have those expectations with the SQ5. Now, the SQ5 is held in high regard. You see a lot more of these on the road than a BMW X3 M40i, Mercedes Benz GLC 43, Porsche Macan S, Alfa Romeo Stelvio, and the list just goes on and on. These are extremely popular, and the reason why it is that way is because this vehicle tends to balance the luxury experience and also performance at the same time, where if you want to just have a comfortable and soothing, relaxing drive, put it in comfort mode and it does just that. But then when you want to have that bad side, when you're on the road by yourself and you want to have some fun, put it in dynamic mode and this crossover comes to life. Unfortunately, because it does balance a luxury and performance driving style, you're not going to have the stiffer handling, you're not going to have the tighter steering, and you're not going to have the stiffer suspension. And for some buyers, they might not like that. But in my opinion, for a lot of vehicles in this particular price range and market, I think you'll have to go a little more upscale, such as an X3M or a GLC 63, to really fully experience what you want to have in a vehicle. And that's why I feel the Audi SQ5 is really a better fit and a suitable fit for a lot of people looking for a family crossover. But when you're by yourself and the kids are not in the second row seats, you can have a lot of fun and really enjoy your time behind the wheel as you're heading to work or as you're doing your weekly shopping. That's where the SQ5 has done a great job for itself and why so many Americans still look at this crossover as being a viable option. But also, as I said during the test drive, the SQ5 is perfect for people who want to have fun, but they also don't want to draw in a lot of attention. And the SQ5 blends right in on the road, and in fact, if you ordered a Q5 with the black optic package, you'd have to look really closely to notice the difference between the two. So that's why I think the SQ5 is still a great option and it's still a great vehicle in this market. But what I would say, though, is that if you're looking for more of a car-like driving experience where you have the sports-tuned suspension, where you have the tighter steering, you may have to look elsewhere. But I do think, though, that if you are looking for a great all-around sporty crossover, that's where the Audi SQ5, in my opinion, is a great vehicle in this price range and segment. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Boston Autoblog so you can see what I'm up to and what vehicles I'll be featuring in the future. And I will see you guys next time.